Yumu was a village surrounded by tall palm trees, green fields, and a river that flowed gently through the land. The people of Yumu were known for their kindness and hard-working nature. But there was one man who cast a dark shadow over the village, Exile. Exile lived in a large compound on the outskirts of the village, far from everyone else. His house was made of thick mud walls, with a thatched roof that seemed to loom over anyone who came near. No one dared to visit him unless it was necessary. Exile was feared because of his power and his terrible temper. He had more yams, goats, and land than anyone else in the village, but he never shared his wealth. Instead, he used it to control and frighten the villagers. People would often say, "Beware of Exile, for he is not like us." Mothers would warn their children, "Stay away from his house, for danger lives there." But no one knew just how dangerous Exile really was. One hot afternoon, as the sun blazed in the sky, a group of children gathered by the river to cool off. Among them was Chaik, a lively boy with bright eyes and a curious mind. He was always asking questions and loved to explore the village. That day, he felt a strange pull towards the forest on the other side of the river. "Chaik, come play with us," his friend Neka called as she splashed in the water. But Chaik's attention was elsewhere. "I will join you later," he said, his eyes fixed on the dark line of trees in the distance. He had heard many stories about the forest, some good and some bad, but today, something inside him wanted to explore it. As he stepped into the cool shade of the trees, the sounds of the village faded behind him. The forest was quiet, except for the rustling of leaves and the occasional chirp of a bird. Chaik walked carefully, his feet making soft crunches on the forest floor. Suddenly, he heard a faint sound, a low hissing that made the hairs on his neck stand up. He followed the sound until he reached a small clearing. There, to his horror, he saw Exile standing alone. But Exile was not truly alone. Chaik's eyes widened as he saw a large snake coiled between Exile's legs, its head swaying back and forth. The snake's eyes glowed red, and it hissed softly, as if speaking to Exile. Chaik was frozen with fear. He had never seen anything so terrifying. The snake seemed to pulse with dark energy, and Exile's face was twisted in a cruel smile. For a moment, Chaik thought Exile saw him, but the man turned away and started walking deeper into the forest, the snake slithering along with him. As soon as they were out of sight, Chaik turned and ran as fast as he could back to the village. His heart pounded in his chest, and his mind raced with fear and confusion. When Chaik returned to the village, he found his friends playing by the riverbank. He was out of breath, but he had to tell someone what he had seen. "Neka, Obina, come here," Chaik called urgently. The children gathered around him, noticing the frightened look on his face. "What's wrong, Chaik?" Obina asked. Chaik glanced around to make sure no one else was listening. "I saw something terrible in the forest." "What did you see?" Neka asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Chaik took a deep breath and whispered, "I saw Exile, and he had a snake between his legs." The other children gasped. "A snake? Are you sure?" Obina asked, not sure if he believed his friend. "Yes, I am sure. The snake was huge and had red eyes. It was with Exile, and it looked evil," Chaik said, his voice trembling. Neka and Obina exchanged nervous glances. They had all heard stories about Exile, but this was something different. "We have to tell someone," Neka said. "But who will believe us?" Chaik shook his head. "I don't know. But we have to be careful. If Exile finds out we know his secret, something bad could happen." The children agreed to keep the secret for now, but they could not stop talking about it among themselves. As they whispered in corners and shadows, the secret began to spread. Soon, the whole village was buzzing with rumors about the evil man with the snake between his legs. The whispers eventually reached the ears of Mama Efima, the wise old woman who lived at the edge of the village. Mama Efima was respected by everyone for her wisdom and knowledge of herbs. She was also known for her ability to sense when something was wrong. One evening, as the sun was setting, Mama Efima sat outside her hut, grinding herbs in a small wooden bowl. She looked up as Chaik and his friends approached, their faces serious and scared. "Mama Efima, we need to talk to you," Chaik said, his voice shaking slightly. Mama Efima nodded and gestured for them to sit. "What troubles you, my children?" Chaik hesitated, then blurted out, "Mama, I saw Ezena in the forest. He had a snake between his legs, and it was evil." Mama Efima's eyes narrowed as she listened. She put down her bowl and leaned closer. "Tell me everything you saw, Chaik." Chaik told her about the snake, about Ezena's cruel smile, and the fear he felt when he saw them together. The other children added what they had heard and how the village was now buzzing with fear. When they finished, Mama Efima was silent for a moment. Then she said, "This is very serious. Ezena is not an ordinary man. He has been using dark magic to control that snake, and it has given him great power. But that power is dangerous, and it must be stopped before it destroys the village." Neka looked up at Mama Efima with wide eyes. "But how can we stop him, Mama? We're just children." Mama Efima smiled gently. "Even the smallest child can make a difference, Neka. We must be clever and brave. The snake is afraid of one thing, fire. If we can make Ezena reveal the snake in front of everyone, we can use fire to defeat it. But how do we make him show the snake?" Obina asked. "We will trick him," Mama Efima replied. "We will hold a festival and invite everyone, including Ezena. During the festival, we will build a large bonfire. I will use my magic to reveal the snake, and you, my children, will help me drive it away with fire." The children listened intently, their fear slowly turning into determination. They knew they were about to face something dangerous, but with Mama Efima's guidance, they believed they could succeed. The next day, Mama Efima and the children began preparing for the festival. They went from house to house, spreading the word and inviting everyone to join. The villagers were excited, as it had been a long time since they had a festival. They started cooking, making decorations, and preparing their best clothes. Ezena heard about the festival too. He was curious, but also suspicious. Why would the village suddenly hold a festival? But he decided to attend anyway, thinking it would be a good opportunity to remind everyone who was in charge. As the day of the festival approached, Mama Efima gathered Chaik, Neka, Obina, and a few other brave children at her hut. "Remember," she told them, "we must act carefully. During the festival, stay close to me. When the time is right, I will give you the signal, and we will reveal the snake." The children nodded, their faces set with determination. Finally, the day of the festival arrived. The village was alive with color and music. The villagers gathered in the village square, laughing, dancing, and enjoying the food. A large bonfire was built in the center, its flames crackling and sending sparks into the evening sky. Ezena arrived at the festival wearing his finest clothes. He walked through the crowd with a smug expression, knowing that everyone was watching him. But as he walked closer to the bonfire, he began to feel uneasy. There was something strange in the air, something he couldn't quite place. Mama Efima saw him and smiled. She walked over to him and said, "Ezena, I'm glad you could join us. The festival would not be the same without you." Ezena nodded but said nothing. He felt a shiver run down his spine as he stood near the fire. Something was not right, but he couldn't figure out what it was. As the festival continued, the music grew louder, and the villagers danced and sang around the bonfire. But Mama Efima's eyes never left Ezena. She knew the time was near. She moved closer to the fire, her hands clutching a small pouch filled with herbs. She began to chant softly under her breath, her words mixing with the sounds of the festival. The children, who had been playing and laughing with the other villagers, noticed Mama Efima's movement and knew it was almost time. Chaik, Neka, and Obina exchanged nervous glances. They knew what they had to do, but their hearts were beating fast with fear and excitement. Izena, meanwhile, was growing more uncomfortable by the minute. The unease he felt earlier was now a heavy weight on his chest. The bonfire's flames seemed to flicker strangely, and he could feel the snake between his legs beginning to stir, as if sensing danger. He tried to leave the square, but the crowd was too thick, and Mama Efima was suddenly right in front of him. Izena, Mama Efima said in a voice that was both kind and firm, "You seem troubled. Why don't you come closer to the fire and join us in a story?" Izena forced a smile. "I prefer to stay where I am, old woman. Your stories do not interest me." Mama Efima chuckled softly. "Ah, but this story is different. It's about a man who thought he was invincible, but who was brought low by his own pride." The villagers, who had been listening to Mama Efima's words, began to gather around her, curious about the story she was about to tell. Izena tried to step back, but the crowd was closing in around him. The snake between his legs started to writhe more violently, sensing the threat that Mama Efima's words posed. Mama Efima began her story, her voice carrying over the crackling of the bonfire. "Once upon a time," she began, "there was a man who believed he could control anything and anyone. He used dark magic to bind a great serpent to his will, hiding it away where no one could see. But magic is a dangerous thing, and the serpent grew stronger and hungrier, feeding off the man's evil heart." As she spoke, Mama Efima reached into her pouch and threw a handful of herbs into the fire. The flames roared and changed color, turning from orange to a deep, eerie blue. The villagers gasped in surprise, but Mama Efima's voice remained steady. The man believed that as long as he had the serpent, no one could harm him. But he forgot that light will always chase away darkness, and fire will always defeat the snake. At that moment, Mama Efima threw another handful of herbs into the fire, and the flames surged even higher. The air was filled with the scent of burning herbs, sharp and powerful. The villagers watched in awe, but Izena's face twisted in fear. He felt the snake between his legs moving wildly, as if it were trying to escape. "Show yourself, creature of darkness," Mama Efima commanded, her voice booming across the square. "Let the truth be revealed to all." Suddenly, there was a loud hiss, followed by a terrible screech. The villagers screamed as the snake between Izena's legs began to materialize, its red eyes glowing in the blue light of the fire. The serpent uncoiled itself from Izena's body, rising up into the air, its scales shimmering with a dark, unnatural light. Izena staggered back, his face pale with terror. He tried to speak, to command the snake, but his voice was lost in the noise of the crowd and the crackling fire. The villagers were frozen in fear, staring at the monstrous snake that had appeared before them.
With one final, ear-splitting screech, the snake lunged towards the bonfire. The flames roared higher as the serpent's body was consumed by the fire. The villagers watched in awe and terror as the snake thrashed wildly, its scales turning to ash and smoke. Izena screamed in agony as the snake burned, feeling the loss of his dark power. The connection between him and the serpent was being severed, and with it, all the evil magic he had used to control the village. As the snake burned away, the flames gradually returned to their normal orange color. The villagers stood in stunned silence, watching as the last remnants of the serpent were consumed by the fire. Izena, now completely powerless, collapsed to the ground, his body shaking with fear and exhaustion. Mama Efima stepped forward, her face stern but calm. "Izena," she said, her voice carrying the weight of her words, "you have brought darkness to this village for too long. Your evil has been revealed, and now you must leave." Izena looked up at her with hollow eyes. "Please, spare me," he begged, his voice a pitiful whisper. "I will leave. I will never return. Just let me live." Mimar Ifema regarded him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You may live, Izena, but you will be exiled from Yumuoma. You will never again set foot in this village. If you do, the fire will consume you as it did your serpent." Izena bowed his head, too weak and defeated to argue. The villagers parted to let him pass, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear, relief, and disgust. Izena stumbled away from the square, his steps unsteady, his once proud figure now a shadow of its former self. As he disappeared into the night, the villagers let out a collective sigh of relief. With Izena gone, the atmosphere in Yumuoma changed completely. The villagers, who had lived in fear for so long, now felt a sense of freedom and joy that they hadn't known in years. The bonfire that had once been a symbol of danger and fear now became a beacon of hope and renewal. Mimar Ifema gathered the children around her and smiled at them. "You were all very brave," she said, her voice filled with pride. "It is because of you that our village is safe." Chaik, Neka, and Obina beamed with pride, though they were still a little shaken by everything that had happened. "We just did what you told us, Mimar Ifema," Chaik said modestly. Mimar Ifema chuckled. "Yes, but it takes great courage to stand up to evil, especially when you are young. You have all shown that courage tonight." The villagers gathered around the children, cheering and clapping for them. They were hailed as heroes, and the festival, which had begun in fear and uncertainty, turned into a celebration of victory and unity. As the night wore on, the villagers danced and sang around the bonfire, their spirits lifted by the triumph over Izena's darkness. Mimar Ifema watched them with a satisfied smile, knowing that the village was safe for now. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, the village of Yumuoma was peaceful once more. The danger that had hung over the village like a dark cloud was gone, and the people felt a new sense of hope and optimism. Chaik, Neka, and Obina walked together to Mimar Ifema's hut, eager to see her again and talk about everything that had happened. When they arrived, Mimar Ifema was already up, tending to her herbs. "Good morning, children," she greeted them with a warm smile. "Good morning, Mimar Ifema," they replied in unison. Chaik stepped forward, his face serious. "Mimar Ifema, do you think Izena will ever come back?" Mimar Ifema shook her head. "No, Chaik, Izena will not come back. He knows that he is no longer welcome here, and without his dark power, he is nothing but a weak man. He will not dare to return." Neka looked thoughtful. "But, Mimar Ifema, how did Izena get that snake in the first place? Why did he choose to do such evil things?" Mimar Ifema sighed and sat down on a small wooden stool. She motioned for the children to sit beside her. "Izena was once like any other man. He was born in this village, and he had the same opportunities as everyone else. But he was always greedy, always wanting more than what was fair. When he grew older, his greed consumed him, and he sought out dark magic to gain power over others." She continued, her voice soft but firm. "Dark magic is a dangerous thing. It promises power, but it always comes with a price. Izena thought he could control the snake, but in the end, the snake began to control him. His heart became as dark as the magic he used, and he lost his humanity. That is why it is important to always choose the path of light and goodness, no matter how tempting the darkness might be." Obina nodded slowly. "I understand, Mimar Ifema. We must always be careful of what we wish for and how we try to get it." Mimar Ifema smiled at him. "Yes, Obina, you are wise beyond your years. Remember this lesson, all of you. Greed and selfishness lead only to pain and suffering, but kindness and courage bring happiness and peace." The children sat in silence for a moment, thinking about Mimar Ifema's words. They knew they had learned something important, something that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. In the days that followed, life in Yumuoma slowly returned to normal. The villagers went back to their work in the fields, the children returned to their games, and the fear that had once gripped the village began to fade. But there was a new sense of unity among the people, a feeling that they had overcome something terrible together. Chaik, Neka, and Obina became closer friends than ever before. They often talked about their adventure and what they had learned from it. They also spent more time with Mimar Ifema, helping her with her herbs and listening to her stories and wisdom. One day, as they were walking through the village, Chaik noticed something different. "Look," he said, pointing to the place where Izena's large, menacing house had once stood. It's gone. Indeed, the house that had once loomed over the village with its dark presence was no more. All that was left was an empty plot of land, overgrown with weeds. Necker smiled. It's as if the village is healing itself, like it's trying to forget that Izena ever lived here. Obina nodded. And that's a good thing. We don't need to remember the evil that he brought. We should focus on the good things and the future. Chaik agreed. You're right. We're free now, and we should be thankful for that. As they continued their walk, they felt a sense of peace and contentment. The village was moving forward, and so were they. Months passed, and the village of Yumu flourished like never before. The crops were abundant, the river flowed clear and strong, and the people were happy and content. The fear and darkness that Izena had brought to the village were now just a distant memory, replaced by hope and joy. Chaik, Necker, and Obina continued to grow, both in age and in wisdom. They were no longer just children, they were young people who had faced danger and come out stronger on the other side. They often talked about what they wanted to do when they were older, about how they would help the village continue to thrive. One day, as they sat by the river, Chaik spoke up. I've been thinking. Maybe one day, I'll become a leader in the village, someone who helps keep the peace and makes sure everyone is treated fairly. Necker smiled. I think you'd be a great leader, Chaik. And I want to be a healer, like Mama Ifema. I want to help people and make sure they stay healthy. Obina grinned. And I'll be a great farmer, growing the best yams and vegetables the village has ever seen. We'll all work together to make sure Yumu stays a happy and strong village. The three friends laughed and talked about their dreams for the future, knowing that they had already achieved something incredible together. They had defeated the darkness that had threatened their home, and they had learned the importance of courage, kindness, and unity. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the river and the village, Chaik, Necker, and Obina knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. They had already proven that no challenge was too great for them, and they were ready for whatever came next. And so, the village of Yumu continued to thrive, its people living in peace and harmony. The story of the evil man with the snake between his legs became a legend, a tale told to children as a reminder of the dangers of greed and the power of goodness. But for Chaik, Necker, Obina, and the rest of the villagers, it was more than just a story. It was a memory of a time when they had faced darkness and emerged victorious, a time when they had learned that even the smallest acts of bravery and kindness could change the world.